What an episode. I don't always say this, but I'm pretty confident that I'm going to mention something in this video twice that you will not hear anywhere else. And the ending of this video is pretty strong. Although the Targaryen Civil War is often thought of as a war between Princess Rhaenyra and her half-brother Aegon Targaryen, Aegon has continued to make it clear that he does not want to inherit the Iron Throne, so the upcoming war is not actually his. The Dance of the Dragons is a war between Rhaenyra and Alicent, the Blacks and the Greens, which is what they wore on this very night. Alicent and Rhaenyra's family sat at opposite ends of the table, and if you look closely, there is one Cargyll twin on each side of the room, a nod to the fact that the upcoming war is not just a civil war, but a familial civil war. Fun fact, almost 200 years later, Lady Helaena Tyrell has two sworn swords in the books. Those two bodyguards are also twins, and they are also called Eric and Eric. Since Lady Helaena cannot tell them apart, she refers to them as left and right, which sheds light on this line here.
Whatever it is, Sir Eric, you need to wait.
I'm Eric, Your Grace.
When Daemon removed half of Aemond's head, most people were shocked, but Aemond One-Eye smirked and Helaena grabbed her own head. Later on, she mumbled what is most likely another prophecy.
Beware the beast beneath the boards.
That raises the question, when did she first learn this new prophecy? In this story, there is a popular wall up north, commonly referred to as the Wall. But that wall is not the only wall, and is arguably not even the most important wall in the story. Maester Aemond once told Sam about another wall, the Wall of Death.
Egg, I dreamed that I was old.
When Daemon killed Vaemond, the so-called Wall of Death presumably opened up so as to allow Vaemond to pass through. That may have also been why Helaena grabbed her head. The opening in the wall may have led to her latest prophetic vision. Another option is that she just grabbed her head because she was scared. As a reminder, when Alicent touched Helaena in the prior episode, Helaena was startled, suggesting that she does not like physical contact. Helaena is now wed to her older brother Aegon, but she does not like spending time with him. Luckily for her, the feeling is mutual.
It isn't so bad, mostly he just ignores you. Except sometimes when he's drunk.
Unfortunately, Aegon does visit Helaena when he is drunk, which implies that he visits her to do their quote-unquote duty, which is probably very uncomfortable for her since she doesn't even like to be touched. And that's not even the worst part about Aegon. When Alicent yelled at Aegon for having slept with a servant, he broke down and told her that he had never asked for any of this, implying that Alicent has been pressuring him non-stop to think of himself as the future king. But Aegon doesn't want to be king. When he found out that Jace and Luke were to be wed to Baela and Rhaena, he smirked, seemingly in a sense of relief, since that marriage would strengthen Jace's claim to the throne, which, in effect, would free Aegon of the burden. If that was all that had happened in this episode, I would have sympathized with him. Unfortunately, that is not all that happened. At the dinner, Aegon joked around with his nephew Jace, asking him whether or not he knew how to do it with a woman. That could have been a funny little sparring match between two family members, but that was not the right time and place considering the fact that there had been a lot of drama in the past, including earlier that day. To make matters worse, Aegon hit on Baela in front of Jace. So Aegon acted inappropriately at dinner, but at the end of the day, his behavior wasn't the worst thing ever, just a young guy being a punk. However, earlier in the episode, it was implied that Aegon forced himself upon a servant named Dianna. If true, then Aegon is no good, and here's where it gets interesting. Alicent gave Dianna some tea, but that might not have been moon tea. The tear in Alicent's eye suggests that Alicent poisoned Dianna so that no one else would learn about Aegon's transgressions.
Have you seen Diana? She's supposed to dress the children.
With that said, 3 people already know about it. Queen Alicent, Sir Eric Cargyll, and Alicent's servant named Talya. Little does she know, Talya is actually an informant for Mysaria, the White Worm. Since Mysaria and Daemon have a past, they might reconnect, and if they do, Mysaria might pass along that information to Daemon at a price. Over the past 6+ years, Daemon's children grew up, and so did Rhaenyra's children. Rhaenyra and Daemon also had 2 children of their own, whom they named Aegon and Viserys. Aegon was named after Aegon the Conqueror, and Viserys was named after her father and his brother, Viserys. But it's worth noting that Aegon the Conqueror had 2 sister wives, Rhaenys and Visenya. So Viserys is not only her father's name, it is indirectly a tribute to Visenya, just as her own name is a derivative of Rhaenys. So, Rhaenyra had 3 children with Sir Harwin Strong, 2 children with Daemon, and she is pregnant. As luck might have it, Syrax laid a clutch of 3 new dragon eggs, 1 for each of their children. The petition scene was fantastic. Otto and Alicent were probably going to award High Tide to Vaemond for 2 reasons. First off, he pledged his loyalty to them, and that means a lot. After all, the Velaryon fleet is the biggest fleet in the realm. On top of that, if Driftmark passed on to Vaemond, everyone would have known that the real reason was because Luke is a bastard. The Hightowers then could have leveraged that in future debates over Rhaenyra and her bastards inheriting the Iron Throne. Unfortunately for the Hightowers, King Viserys surprised everyone by showing up and taking the Iron Throne one last time so as to fight for his firstborn child, Rhaenyra. I don't know about you, but that was the first time that it got dusty over here. The first of a few times.
I said I'm fine.
To his surprise, it was his brother Daemon. The writers of this show are so good. The icing on the cake was that Viserys didn't directly pass the torch to Rhaenyra. Instead, he gave the power of the day to his cousin Rhaenys, the queen who never was. Rhaenys has been through a lot. When her father died, she was passed over for her uncle, Balon, who was Viserys and Daemon's father. When Balon died, she was passed over again, this time for her younger cousin Viserys. More recently, Rhaenys lost her daughter Laena and then her son Laenor, and now she received word that she might soon lose her husband Corlys. So Rhaenys has been through a lot, and like many, Rhaenys believed that Rhaenyra and Daemon killed her son. So she had no reason to align with Rhaenyra, but Rhaenyra looked Rhaenys in the eye and told her that she had loved Laenor and that she had not ordered his death. It's open to interpretation, but I think that Rhaenys believed her. Rhaenyra offered to betroth her children to Laena's children, and Rhaenys responded by saying that Rhaenyra's plea was both generous and desperate. That was a nod back to the offer which Rhaenyra had made to Alicent in terms of Jace and Helaena. So, Rhaenys had told Corlys that she wanted Driftmark to pass on to Baela, but Corlys wanted it to pass on to Luke. In the end, she stuck by Corlys' side by claiming that the Driftwood throne would pass on to Luke. With that said, her granddaughters were also rewarded. Since Rhaena was betrothed to Luke, Rhaena stands to inherit the Driftwood throne, and since Baela was betrothed to Jace, Baela and her children stand to inherit the Iron Throne. King Viserys had refused to drink milk of the poppy so that he could attend that petition, and at the end of the petition, he was in a lot of pain, but once again, he refused to drink milk of the poppy so that he could have one last supper with his family. All of his family. He began the dinner with a toast to Luke, as well as Jace, Baela, and Rhaena. Then, he took off his mask so that his family could see him. The real him. He poured his heart out to them all, and once again, it got dusty over here.
Will I be remembered as a good king, Lionel?
King Viserys might not have been the realm's best king, but for the most part, he was a good man. Daenerys once told Mirri Maz Duur that there were powers older and stronger than hatred, namely, love. And that was what Viserys had done. He had leveraged the power of love. His speech was so moving that Rhaenyra toasted to Alicent, and Alicent responded in turn. After all that they had been through, I had thought that they had already crossed the Rubicon, but nope, they both proved to be more forgiving and more loving than I could ever hope to be, so hats off to them both. Unfortunately, just as Otto had planted seeds of doubt inside Alicent's head, Alicent had already planted seeds of doubt inside the heads of her own children. Those seeds failed to sprout inside Aegon, but the same cannot be said for Aemond One-Eye, possibly due to the fact that Luke had taken out his eye. When Jace and Luke went to the yard for the first time in a long time, they saw Aemond defeat Sir Criston Cole, which goes to show how far along Aemond has come as a warrior. A very, very observant warrior.
You win in tourneys in no time.
I don't give a shit about tourneys. Nephews?
When Jace slammed his fist down onto the table and stood up, Aemond One-Eye stood up in defense of his brother. As a result, Jace backpedaled and toasted to his uncles. But then, Jace asked Helaena to dance. Big mistake. Aegon looked over at his brother for support, and Aemond turned and watched Jace intently the entire time. Aemond One-Eye is a true dragon, and unbeknownst to everyone at the table, the fire inside of him had begun to grow. While Aemond stared at Jace, Luke began to stare at Aemond. Luke, being the punk that he is, began to laugh in mockery, but despite being on Aemond's blind side, Aemond saw him. The One-Eyed Father had given a toast and been carried out, which opened the door for the One-Eyed Warrior to deliver a toast of his own. Aemond toasted to the health of his nephews, who were so handsome, wise, and you know what Daemon was thinking.
Say it. Strong.
The guard stepped in to split them up, and the Rogue Prince stepped in with a few unspoken words. What about me, nephew? Despite the outburst, Alicent and Rhaenyra held true to their reborn friendship, and Alicent even suggested that Rhaenyra stay in King's Landing. Unfortunately, Rhaenyra chose to leave King's Landing and return by dragon, which may eventually prove to be true, though under much different circumstances. Earlier in the episode, Rhaenyra had visited Viserys, and he had initially thought that she was Alicent. The second time happened in reverse. Alicent visited Viserys, and this time he thought that she was Rhaenyra. He never realized the truth, so he spoke to her as if she were Rhaenyra. When Rhaenyra had visited him, she had asked him if he really believed in the Song of Ice and Fire, and he finally found the strength to answer her. Little did he know, he was actually speaking to Alicent. Viserys told Alicent about the prince that was promised, who would unite the realm against the cold and the dark.
Promise me, Ned.
Since he thought that she was Rhaenyra, he told Alicent that she was the one. But Alicent didn't realize that. Alicent thought that Viserys was speaking about her son Aegon. As a reminder, King Viserys had already told a young Alicent how he had dreamt of a male babe born to him wearing Aegon the Conqueror's crown. So now, Alicent thinks that her son Aegon is the child from Viserys' dream. Long story short, Alicent had made amends with Rhaenyra and toasted to Rhaenyra becoming queen. But now, she has been misled by a misunderstanding of prophecy. So this sheds an entirely new light on the choices that Alicent makes going forward. It's very tragic. The very last words that Viserys ever said were, "My love." What did he mean by that? Viserys was married to his cousin, Aemma Arryn, and he loved her dearly. Unfortunately, his quest to fulfill prophecy killed her. Though he remarried and loved Alicent in a fashion, Aemma remained his one true love. Towards the twilight of his life, he even mistakenly referred to Alicent as Aemma. Earlier in the video, we spoke about a concept known as the Wall of Death, and in this episode, Viserys passed by that Wall of Death. Viserys was reunited with Queen Aemma.
My love.
Viserys had done his best to unite his family, and it worked, at least for a little. But as a book reader who knows what is about to happen, this is one of the most tragic episodes of television that I've ever seen. Fortunately for Viserys, he does not have to witness the Dance of the Dragons, which is actually a tragedy better described as the dying of the dragons. Viserys' final memories were those of a loving family who is very, very
Strong.
You're right. As always. It is perhaps best not to know.